The Los Angeles County Courthouse loomed like a concrete fortress under a hazy afternoon sky, its walls steeped in decades of verdicts and secrets. Inside, the air hung heavy, stale, tense, buzzing with the low hum of anticipation. The gallery was packed, spectators craning their necks, whispering behind cupped hands as the scene unfolded. At the defendant's table stood Jalen Dawson, a wiry 19-year-old with a hoodie pulled low and hands shoved deep in his pockets. To most, he looked out of place, too young, too casual for the weight of the charges pinned against him. Grand theft auto and resisting arrest. Serious crimes. The kind that could bury a kid like him. But Jalen's chin tilted up just enough to signal he wasn't here to cower. High above, Judge Walter Grayson presided like a king on his throne, his black robe pooling around him as he leaned back in his chair. His fingers drummed a lazy rhythm on the polished oak desk, his gray eyes peering over wire-rimmed glasses with a mix of boredom and disdain. He'd seen 100 kids like Jalen, cocky, clueless, destined for a quick guilty plea in a cell. You think you're some kind of legal expert? Grayson's voice dripped with dry amusement, cutting through the room like a dull blade. This isn't debate club, kid. A ripple of laughter spread, bailiff, stenographer, prosecutor, all smirking like they'd heard the punchline before. Jalen didn't laugh. His lips twitched, a faint smirk of his own flickering to life, but his eyes stayed locked on the judge. He'd been waiting for this. Grayson wasn't wrong to underestimate him. At first glance, Jalen was just another teen in trouble. But this wasn't some impulsive kid who stumbled into a courtroom. Jalen had spent years preparing, not for this exact moment. He never planned to be a defendant, but for the game itself. Growing up, while his friends chased jump shots or high scores, Jalen chased something else: justice. His mother, Denise Dawson, a paralegal with 2 decades under her belt, brought home war stories, crooked prosecutors, lazy attorneys, judges who'd already made up their minds. Jalen soaked it all in. By 14, he could dissect a trial faster than most law grads, running mock arguments in his head, picking apart imaginary cases until every angle was razor-sharp. Today, that wasn't imaginary anymore. Today it was real. Let's make this quick, Grayson sighed, flipping open the case file with a flick of his wrist. I've got a golf game at 2. More chuckles from the peanut gallery. Jalen's smirk deepened, barely noticeable, but it was there. Grayson had just handed him an opening, and the room hadn't caught on yet. Prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rose, a shark in a tailored suit, his tie knotted like a noose, and his voice polished to a predatory gleam. Your Honor, the state will prove beyond shadow of a doubt that Jalen Dawson was caught red-handed in a stolen 2022 Audi A6, reported missing mere hours before his arrest. Officers pursued him through downtown LA. He tried to flee, resisted, and was apprehended. His fingerprints? All over the steering wheel. The evidence speaks for itself. The words hit like a gavel, heavy and final. The gallery shifted, murmurs swelling. A stolen car. A chase. Fingerprints. Open and shut, right? Grayson glanced at Jalen, then back to Carrington. Go on. The prosecutor strutted toward the jury box, shoes clicking like a metronome. The defense might spin some tale. Poor Jalen, just a victim of circumstance. He pivoted, locking eyes with Jalen for the first time, a smirk tugging at his lips. But let's be real. What kind of victim runs from the police? The room tensed. Grayson propped his chin on his hand, intrigued. Carrington pressed on, waving his stack of papers. Officer Daniel Ruiz saw him behind the wheel before he bolted. The arrest? By the book. Grayson nodded, exhaling through his nose. Sounds straightforward. To everyone else, it was case closed, kid cooked. But Jalen hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. He'd spent too long studying the system to miss the cracks hiding in plain sight. He stayed silent, letting them build their house of cards. Soon, he'd knock it down. Grayson tapped his gavel lightly. Let's hear the defense. Jalen's public defender, Lisa Thornton, a frazzled woman with a thin stack of notes, stood, voice shaky. Your Honor, my client. Jalen's hand brushed her arm, a quiet signal. She froze, then sank back into her chair. Every eye swiveled to him as he stepped forward. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. The room went dead silent. Grayson blinked, amusement curling his lips. You'll what? Jalen's voice was calm, steady as steel. "I'll be defending myself." A murmur erupted. Shock, disbelief, a few stifled laughs. Carrington barked a sharp chuckle. This should be interesting. But the air shifted when Jalen took his next step, hands sliding out of his pockets, stance widening like a boxer stepping into the ring. This wasn't a kid playing lawyer. This was something else. The courtroom settled. Every breath held as Jalen faced the judge. "Your Honor, before I start, I'd like to clarify something with the prosecution." Carrington raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "Go ahead." Jalen paced forward, slow and deliberate. "You said Officer Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel before the arrest, right?" Carrington sighed, already bored. "That's right. It's in his report." Jalen nodded, turning to Grayson. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence." Grayson squinted. "On what grounds?" Jalen gestured toward the prosecution table, voice calm but edged with intent. "Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase started." Carrington's smirk flickered. "What are you talking about?" Jalen stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Your Honor, I'd like to request Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If he saw me, his location should match the report. But I'm betting it won't." The gallery buzzed, heads turning. Grayson frowned, glancing at Carrington. "Counselor." The prosecutor's jaw tightened, his polish cracking. "That report came from an officer of the law, Your Honor. Are we really entertaining this kid over a professional?" Jalen shrugged, casual but cutting. "If Ruiz was there, the data will back him up. If not, he let it hang." Grayson studied him, then turned to Carrington. "Any issue with verifying the logs?" Carrington hesitated, a beat too long. The jury noticed. The gallery noticed. "No objections," he muttered, but the tide was turning. The room hushed, tension coiling tighter. Carrington rallied, shuffling his papers. "While we wait, Your Honor, the fingerprints on the steering wheel still tie the defendant to the crime." Jalen nodded, almost agreeing. "True." He faced the jury, locking eyes with each one. "But let's unpack that. The prosecution says my prints mean I stole the car. Imagine this. You're in a store, try on a coat, touch the pockets, leave it behind. Someone steals it later. Are you the thief because your prints are on it?" A juror frowned. Another shifted. Whispers rippled. "The Audi was parked outside of 7 to 11 hours before it was stolen." Jalen continued, voice smooth as a blade. "I was there with friends. I leaned on it, opened the door. Unlocked, by the way, just messing around. I didn't drive it. Didn't take it. Does touching something make you a criminal?" Carrington scrambled, flipping notes. "And the forensic evidence." Jalen cut in, turning to Grayson. "Your Honor, was the forensic specialist subpoenaed to testify?" Grayson blinked. Carrington stammered, "No, but..." Jalen pressed, relentless. "So the state's convicting me with prints, but I can't question the expert? No chain of custody. No accuracy check." Grayson rubbed his temple, the case slipping from his grip. Jalen wasn't done. He stepped forward, voice rising with purpose. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit a statement from the car's owner, Raymond Whitaker." Grayson's brow furrowed. "The owner?" Jalen nodded. "He told police something the prosecution buried. He pulled a transcript from his file, reading aloud. "I left my car running at the gas station. Some kid took it. Not the guy you arrested. I saw him. He was white." A gasp swept the room. Jalen held up the paper. "That's from the original report. Ignored by the state. I don't match the thief's description, yet they pinned it on me." Carrington lunged. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." "He was caught with..." Jalen shook his head. "I wasn't. I was blocks away, walking home after the car was ditched. No chase. No resistance. Just bad police work and a kid who fit their profile." Silence crashed down. Grayson exhaled, glasses glinting as he stared at Jalen. "Anything further, Counselor?" Carrington froze, face red. "No, Your Honor." Grayson leaned forward, voice low. "Case dismissed." The room exploded, half in shock, half in awe. Reporters scribbled. Jurors gaped. Jalen stood still, letting it sink in. Grayson's gavel hovered, his eyes locked on the kid he'd misjudged. "Mr. Dawson," he called as Jalen turned to leave. Jalen paused. "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already there in spirit. Outside, the courthouse steps swarmed with chaos. Cameras flashing, mics jabbing. Jalen, did you expect to win? What's next? He pulled his hoodie up, brushing past. His mother waited below, arms crossed, eyes fierce. Boy, you scare me to death, Denise said, voice tight. Jalen grinned. Had to take the shot, Ma. She hugged him hard, pride breaking through her glare. Across the street, Grayson watched from his car, his usual swagger gone. He'd expected routine. Instead, he'd gotten a reckoning. Days later, the story blew up. Newsrooms, X everywhere. Teen school's judge walks free. Jalen didn't care about the headlines. This wasn't about fame. It was about the system, how it chewed up kids who didn't know how to fight back. He'd had the tools, years of study, a paralegal mom, a mind like a steel trap. But how many didn't? That question burned. Next time he stood in a courtroom, he wouldn't be in cuffs. He'd be in a suit, fighting for the ones who couldn't. Think about it. How many cases slide by on shortcuts and bias? How many Jalens don't get their shot? Hit like, subscribe, share your take. Because this isn't just one story. It's a wake-up call.